Welcome to Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I speak with painter and illustrator Jonny Negron. Enjoy.
Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny
Yo,
Yes, sir.
Michael,
Yo,
how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great too. I'm happy we finally got the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate the persistence.
I mean, it's me who canceled a bunch of times. I've been a bit
That's true.
over the last. Anyway, yeah, good to finally do this.
Yeah, where you at? You at the studio?
I'm at the studio.
And we're in LA.
Studio's downtown LA, yeah, in the Flower District.
I didn't know there was a flower in downtown LA.
The Flower District it's part of downtown. It's really close to Skid Row.
Got you. How long you been there? Because I mean, the last time we saw each other was
I've had a studio
many years ago.
I've had a studio downtown for about 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I moved in a few months before the pandemic, so I spent my time here downtown.
And I'm assuming that's mostly focused on painting, but also music and some comics in there?
Yeah, painting has been the focus for the last several years, and music definitely. It's just a place where I fuck around, and just kind of experiment. And
Music or both?
music, video, yeah.
I mean, I think that's interesting to me is just what you're doing with each medium and what you allow yourself to do in each medium. Because I know, obviously I primarily think of you as a comic artist just because that's what you were doing when I met you. And
Right, I think that's how my name was introduced to a lot of people, was through comics many years ago.
yeah, but I mean, comics are a lot of work and not a lot of money. So
No, yeah. Yeah.
when we talk about painting, like, can you talk about the practicality of that versus comics? Like, it's more realistic to live off of the paintings than comics, right? It seems fairly obvious, but
yeah, I mean, there's a much higher ceiling for fine art. I mean, I think a good example when I think of the comparison between an illustrator or a cartoonist versus a fine artist is, I think of Roy Lichtenstein, who, some of his most famous works are copies of cartoonist panels, right? Like mainly, what's his name? Jack Kirby, right? And obviously, like his, Jack Kirby probably never sold a piece for as much as Roy Lichtenstein's pieces sell for.
yes.
But I mean, the approach for me, it was a kind of gradual progression. I think storytelling has always been the foundation of the way I approach my concepts, So with fine art, that kind of narrative aspect is still there. It's just, whereas a comic is a series of images. The painting is kind of telling its own individualized story. But from piece to piece, there is a kind of continuum with a lot of the recent work. Like, I see it as all kind of existing in this kind of long form kind of narrative. And even if it's thematically, like, it's a kind of thematic progression that's taking place.
Right, that's pretty clear in your shows that they are sequential still.
There's
sequential
a sequence,
panels.
yeah, and it's. I think I've gone deeper into that kind of just the approach to sequence, and like, not. What I mean by that is to also interpret various themes, like colors, for example. Like, color has been a significant aspect of the work that I've produced over the last few years, where I've been phasing through different colors and the kind of associative or corresponding themes with each one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the color is very beautiful.
Thanks, dude.
Very much enjoy the colors.
Yeah, it's something I've always been passionate about. I sometimes think, like, I was born in Puerto Rico and, moved to the States when I was a baby. But I think there's something just about the vibrancy of a tropical place had made a significant impression on me, because I remember a lot of those experiences, although I was so young. So I feel like I took a part of that with me.
At what age did you move?
2.
Wow.
But
and where'd you move to?
I have distinct memories from that time, because I can't mistake them for being I can't mistake them for being in Long Island. They didn't have palm trees in Long Island.
Right.
Yeah, I went to Long Island. That was your next question. Yeah, so I grew up in Long Island in a town called Patchogue.
Interesting. I never realized that you moved at 2.
Yeah, I was a baby. My mom's from New York. My father grew up he's from Puerto Rico.
Gotcha.
They met there, and yeah.
Well, you sent me over a comic that's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I feel like comics are such a drag in some ways that it's interesting. And you showed me a comic in Austin many years ago. Trying to remember.
Yeah, that's when I probably started to work on it. That was probably 2015, I want to say.
That is that comic, right?
Right. So I've been working on this same comic intermittently for the last 10 years. But yeah, it's the same one. It's called Legendary Protein Trance Realm. And I'm hoping to finally get it out to the public within the next year.
So it's interesting to me that you're sticking with it, because I feel like I know a lot of people who start comics and don't finish them. Especially there are quite a few that I haven't finished, to be honest with you. But you got to finish what you start. And I think this one, there was something about it that I kept returning to. And to be honest, like, I guess you could say, like, my interest in comics was really kind of dwindling around the time where I was working on this. Mm-hmm. And I think initially, like, I really didn't like it at first. And I think it was because it wasn't really coming from a place that was meaningful for me. At the time, I just thought it was a funny idea. It was a friend who actually suggested the story, and he was like, he was like, Johnny, it would be cool to see, like, what your idea of a Brian De Palma movie would look like. So my first thought was like Scarface, something kind of trashy and corny, to be honest, which I love that kind of stuff. Like, I love, like, B movies. I love, like, really bad movies that are, like, so bad that they're hilarious. I love that shit. And so I wanted to make something with that kind of spirit. And I think that's obvious from looking at some of the images. But
over time, I realized I wanted to make it something that told a more profound statement, or like something with more substance to it. And as I worked on it little by little, I just kept wanting to add more to it, just to make it a more kind of concise idea. So it's taken 10 years. And hopefully this year will be the final year of its production.
Yeah, when do you find the time to work on it? Because it's hard to, when you aren't in a groove with the comic, I find it very hard to get through it. Like if you try to pick away once a week or something, it's
I mean,
super
over the
difficult.
last 10 years, it's very, very sporadic. To be honest with you, like I would say like from 2015 to like 2018, I would work on it somewhat, maybe once or twice a month, but time just there's so many other priorities that I've focused on since then. So like during the pandemic, I was working on it, but every time I set to work on it for these last many years, I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish it this year. And then it gets away from me. But this year I've been working on it again. And, I think it's reinvigorated my love of comics. I've always loved it. And it's really my first love. When I was a kid, that's really the only thing I wanted to do. I had no interest in it. Like, I loved art. I was always creative my entire life. But it was really until I got older that, as I matured and I developed more interests, that they were directed elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you said something earlier about like, what did you say? Comics can be a drag. What do you mean by that?
I actually mean that in the weight can be very heavy. Whereas
just for the experience of making it. I mean, it's kind of how do you say, there's not a lot of love in it, to be honest with you. Like to be a person who makes it, it's a very time consuming process. And to be honest, you're not getting much of a return on it. Which is fine. I see it really as a passion, and I envy. You know what? Never mind. Let's scratch that part. But I love comics still. I still read them. Like I read mangas. Like I fell in love with One Piece a few years ago, just because I was like, damn, why are so many people into this? And and I get it. I totally get why people love it. But it's just such a fun format to me, and I think sometimes it's kind of it's a great medium between reading, obviously, and just looking at visuals. Right? It's not as stimulating as a TV show, but I think for me, as someone who just loves imagery, who loves art, and just exhibition of skills from the artists who are creating them, it's really a joy. I've always been very visual. Like from the time I was very young, I would just look at books. I would look at things like the Guinness Book of World Record, and just any kind of book that was visually very intensive. I would just spend hours just flipping through it. So I love having the opportunity to provide that as an artist myself. And yeah, I mean, I always said that I would make tons of books, so I need to catch up. There's still quite a few stories that I would love to tell.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So you were published by Picture Box, right? Towards the end of Picture Box.
Yeah, we did a book in 2012.
And then when did you start kind of pivoting to painting, career-wise?
With painting, let's see, that's a great question. I would say it was I think transitioning from working with Picture Box, that was tough because Picture Box was my first choice as a publisher. I thought they made really great books, and working with Picture Box also helped me to appreciate just the nuance of book design and the way that the book is put together. And I felt like they were kind of hard shoes to fill. And around the same time, I was working at a bookstore in Austin, Texas. I spent many years in Austin. The bookstore is called, it's no longer in business, but it was called Farewell Books. And so I was working there, and I had an exhibition there the following year, I think 2014, which was maybe my first solo exhibition. And I think that just gave me the confidence that I could do it. Like, I think just having that opportunity to kind of conceptualize singular works and develop that practice, and I think I started to have breakthroughs around that time where I realized like I could still use all of these kinds of symbols for storytelling and imagery, but to consolidate it into one piece. And things just gradually progressed from there. The more I exhibited, the more I'd have opportunities. And that's what led me to working with Chateau, who's been representing me for the last few years.
Nice. It's just interesting how hard an artist has to work just to get to the level of comfort that like a very ordinary like accountant would be at, or someone working at any job, you know?
History shows us that some of the most renowned artists struggled, and they struggled a lot. And I think we live in a time that's been really fortunate where people can be wildly successful. But in a lot of cases, there are exceptions.
Absolutely.
I think as advice to anyone who's aspiring to be in a creative field, I think it's good to have like a secure income stream. You feel me?
Yeah.
But for me, honestly, like I gambled a lot. I kind of, I've lived a pretty unconventional kind of life, which, I'll be 40 this year. So, there was a way that it worked for many years, though. Just kind of being a single person living downtown LA, like getting fucked up and all that kind of shit.
Yes.
Yeah, I strive for balance now. I think, anyone should seek balance in their life. And I think there's a kind of like optical illusion that happens, especially now with social media, that like it's, we see people doing things and like it's aspirational, but we don't necessarily know how well a person's actually doing behind the camera, or behind that wall.
Of course.
So I think that it applies to art too. It's like I never know.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But do you find balance inspiring from an artistic perspective?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're saying it's important to strive for balance at a certain point, right? And
yeah,
I think there's a suspicion when you're younger that there's a kind of squareness, or there's a conflation of domesticity with balance, and that if you were to find it or achieve that, your well would kind of run dry in respect to inspiration. Now, I don't find that to be true at all, but I certainly thought that at some point,
Right.
And that's what I mean is like, do these extreme, your depictions are often kind of these party environments that feel sunken.
Yeah, they came from experience. Absolutely.
Right.
And I think Yeah, I believe in living through experience, and I think as a person who wanted to tell stories or have, to have subject matter to work from, I wanted to have experience. So I experienced a lot and did a lot of things that I knew would be temporary, if you know what I mean. Like I did a lot of drugs, I partied a lot. There were a lot of there were many mischievous times back in the day. But I really just wanted the experience. And I think now that I'm at an age where I'm ready to settle down, I'm cool with just kind of chilling and having a more kind of steady routine.
There's a funny saying, once a philosopher, twice a pervert. Sounds like you were interested in the experiential nature of that exploration more than it itself, if that makes sense.
Perhaps. I think sometimes I feel like as an artist, like I'm not really, like I'm a non-being.
Sure.
That my life, that the life of an artist is transcended by the work they produce. But their work is also like a mask.
That the work objectifies you in some weird way? That it's using you?
That's one way to put it. I think the artist is always telling their own story in some way, or the artist should be. I think even if it's subconscious, they're giving a piece of their own experience and adapting it or translating it to their medium.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because when I initially encountered your work very early on, I was struck by and I was confused by this as well in terms of how I felt judgmentally, how current it was. So like I had this hang up, and I still do in some sense, that like I don't want to draw a guy in jeans or modern clothing. I don't want to draw like a time period I exist in. And so I respected.
Why is that?
Like, I don't know. I think that's a long. Let me get through this thought, and then maybe we can get into that. But So, like, I would look at your drawings of the big, bodacious women, and they would be wearing like
huge woman, the huge busty woman.
They were very busty, and they'd be wearing like the kind of the clothing of that time, that Tumblr time, and I had this kind of contrarian impulse. So I was like, is he cheating or something by like making a likable image that's going to be, reposted on Tumblr? Because it was very easy to like. It was well drawn. It was elegant. It's beautiful. And it kind of carried the time period it was made within. And I think it speaks to what you're saying about the translation of your own actual experiences. So, I've come around to the notion that
I hear you. That was just your immediate reaction. You were like, I'm not so sure how I feel about this.
Yeah, do you know what I mean by like, is that...
Like, you felt
is it cheating?
Contemporary.
It's definitely not.
I don't agree, obviously, but...
Yeah.
I mean, one way I look at it like this, because I've received this question before. Like there have been some who don't necessarily get what I'm doing, and that's fine. It's subjective at the end of the day. Like it's not everything is for everyone, but our present is the history of the future, and for me, like I'm thinking in this. I'm thinking in an art historical way where eventually this will be a historical depiction of this time. So for me, I want to emphasize, observing the world around me as a source of inspiration. And, for me, it draws me back into reality in a way. Like, I love fantasy. I've been fascinated by fantasy and things like that from when I was very young, but there's something about finding interesting things in reality that can be really fun as an artist. And like living in LA, for example, like there's so much fashion here. There's so many interesting looking people. Downtown especially, it's like you'll see, like models, shooting on Broadway, and then like homeless people masturbating like under bed sheets or something like that. And like there's just so much interesting style, and like I get a lot of inspiration just from seeing real people. And yeah, absolutely, fashion is definitely one. But I see fashion also as a marker of time, because fashion is not, there's no perennial idea of fashion. Right, like you said, jeans, for example, but like, how long have jeans really been around? Not that long, right? Like, it's a fairly modern thing, and so for me, like, I like to use those things, Like,
and I think that, like, I think that's about very wise,
like I'll think of what's that guy's name? Eggers, is it the guy who made the new Nosferatu? Like, that dude seems like he's very obsessed with with like classic stuff, right? Like, I feel like he would hate to shoot someone wearing a pair of fucking Levi's or something like that.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's
which
what
is
I'm
cool.
saying.
I feel like people have a kind of preferred aesthetic that they want to see, but to me, I think it's important to use the world around us, and it's not always, I feel like sometimes that can be an expression of a person's preferences or their discrimination, if you will. Whereas with the work that I've produced, especially as a painter, I try to observe things that I've seen. Like, one piece that I always think of is there's this piece of a guy holding up a bottle of poppers to his nose, right? Like, poppers, for those who don't know, it's like a party drug. Like, you sniff it, it makes you feel like retarded. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say
your butthole gets loose.
Yeah, it's like, it does stuff. It can be really fun. It kind of like blood rushes to your head, whatever. And so I painted that because I've had experiences where I've been at parties and people have passed it around. And but I remember showing it to an interviewer one time, and the interviewer was like, he seemed a bit perplexed by it. He was like, "Oh, this is kind of horrifying," because I think some people, maybe especially people who've never experienced something like that, they might see it with like as a degenerate thing. But if you have so many experiences where hundreds, if not thousands of people are engaging in this kind of stuff, like what do you think people are doing at like Coachella, right? Like, people are they're indulging, right? Like, that's a very important part of life, I think, for the average Western person, right? Like, to indulge and have a great time, like in most situations that I've experienced, right? So that's where I drew a lot of inspiration from that. Like, especially living here in LA, especially being an artist, where viewing art it's generally a part of someone's night experience, right? Someone might be on a date or going to the cinema, going to the opera, whatever, and they stop at an opening. It's not the entirety of a person's evening. And so I wanted to depict the kinds of aspects of what a person might be experiencing at night, and that's kind of where it evolved from there.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for that, because again, and I've worked through it a bit, but yeah, perhaps I don't love the world as it is.
You want to escape a little bit as an artist.
No, well, I definitely want to escape something, I suppose, but I want some kind of fundamental kind of You know, it's funny. I think sometimes when you try to avoid markers of time, you kind of don't allow yourself to even approach timelessness, if that makes sense. Like by your approach, I think you have a higher probability of reaching something timeless because it is so specific. It goes kind of through. But for me, I always wanted to draw things that didn't feel locked. I wanted them to be more symbols than of this world or something. So drawing genes would mean it exists within a certain time frame.
I don't think those things are exclusive though. Like symbology is also like, it's crucial to me and it informs a lot of my work. But a lot of the symbols that I've depicted are kind of, they're disguised in these contemporary scenes.
Exactly. They're wearing the kind of skin of today. And I think to your credit, that means you're more valuable to the time you live in.
I don't know about that, but that's very flattering of you.
Well, you're embracing something.
High value.
I'm just saying you're embracing the nowness in a way that I think has always been true in the work.
Absolutely.
You know, even, and the thing I was critical of when I was younger, and like, again, could be an inferiority complex, but just suspicious of like, again, this kind of thing popping in my head. Is that too easy? Is it too easy to draw a kind of hipster girl with large orbs, you know? And the answer is no. I mean, there are, obviously you're very good at drawing, so it's not like anyone could have done it. You know, you were doing it and it was effective and it was very clear you were doing it. It was not derivative. So,
well, I think we love things that are familiar. I think we can think of countless examples of art, or music is a great example where there's reappropriation or there's elements of another work, right? Or another intellectual property or something like that. Like rap, for example, you know, it's using familiar samples. Like some of the most beloved hip hop songs are, you know, they're like edited, they're edited classic songs or something like that.
No, it's true. I mean, I think I resented that a little bit. Like the viewer needed like a kind of easy entry. But I think over time I realized, well, that's, you know, the world is so oversaturated with visual stimuli. You have to give something to the viewer.
Well,
at the very least.
I mean, speaking on the work that I was making on Tumblr, like, you know, back then I was honestly really hungry. And this is still when my blinders were on for comics. And so, of course, you know, I was thinking about people like R. Crumb and the mark that he made and exploring a style of my own. Like, I hadn't really arrived at one yet. Like, I would just draw a lot every day and just wanted to explore like my own kind of ways of storytelling and stuff. So the work was still really eclectic, but then around that time I was getting really interested in a lot of Japanese erotic art, which I think is just far more. I think, you know, there's some examples of erotic art that just go into realms that other places just don't seem to go. And that was really, that was giving me juice, honestly, because I feel like there was so much imagery that came from Japanese erotica that was like really taboo. And not that I wanted to like depict like things like that, but I guess you could say I started to explore ideas that were maybe more like more risque, but then also like being really hungry as an artist the more I depicted these kinds of erotic, voluptuous women, the response was, there was a pretty big response. So that encouraged me to do more. It was really a reflection of what the viewers wanted. And I think especially on a platform like Tumblr, using the internet, I was consciously making imagery that I felt like fit into that.
And you view that as a positive, right?
A positive? I mean, it was a positive experience. I think it exposed my work to a wide audience.
No, I asked because like some people again would have this. I think some artists have to approach things very obliquely and oftentimes not admit that they crave some form of attention. So I think there's something refreshing about just saying, you understood the nature of the platform that you were making work on at the time. And
well, I have to be honest, I didn't go through an institution or anything like this. So
right.
So I really I took the experience really literally. Like I had the opportunity to go to school, and I just didn't. I think when at the age of 18, when most of us are going into college, I just felt like I just didn't have enough life experience. And then I asked myself, especially, when I wanted to tell stories, what stories am I going to, what interesting stories or am I going to get from being in a dorm, from being in college for the next 4 years of my life? And I kind of decided to take a more uncertain path. And so I was working a lot, doing different kinds of work. But you could say I was studying independently. I continue to study art. I'm an avid reader. So I've just always been learning new things to apply to my life. And, but yeah, like you said, as an artist, I certainly wanted to just find a way to get attention. I never wanted to be defined by the works that I did for Tumblr, because I always had a vision to do something more. So I did want the attention just to find a way to sustain myself in the future. And I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity, but I never wanted to put myself into a box as an artist. And that's why back then, 2011, 2012, when I was making work like that, I didn't talk about it a lot, because I wanted to develop my work more to where I could have just more to elaborate on.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the depth of the work has definitely increased over time.
Obviously, and I think it still rings true. If you go on Instagram, you see the numbers, right? You see what people click on. Sex is very, beauty and bodies is something that's very attractive to people. And so, a lot of the conversations would usually around, oh, you draw these girls. And I think knowing myself, I guess you could say I shied away from it a bit, because I was well, I don't want this to be my brand.
Well, it's a fine line to walk. But I think you've transcended it, right? You don't feel that you're boxed into that.
No, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think so at all. I think I'm grateful that I've been able to expand on the work and mature, and that's honestly been the foundation of my approach to making art for a long time. I always hoped that I would have the opportunity to continue to evolve as an artist, and to not just be confined to one medium or one way of doing things, but to continue to experiment and do things like music and video, and to incorporate many different expressions as possible.
Yeah, that becomes a very real challenge when when it's a career, because I think it's
It
very
becomes
rare
a struggle.
for.
Yeah, it's like I think there is an expectation, and you have clientele who are expecting or desiring for you to produce certain kinds of work.
Yeah, they see you. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, these are strangers effectively viewing you as like a voyeur, and they don't want you to change so much that they don't even recognize your essence anymore. So
Right.
that's where
They want to
being
recognize. They want to recognize.
you. They want to know, oh, that's what's interesting about the work to me, is like, it's that kind of being and becoming dynamic where your work has obviously changed over time, but it's very clearly your work. And that brings me back to the notion of, you were saying you were exploring at that time, 2012 or so. And do you feel that you now you understand your style in a way that's comforting, and you can kind of push other boundaries? You kind of have the visual world figured out?
Yeah, to an extent.
I mean, I asked that, and I always reference this. Like, there's a Miyazaki quote about seeing Mobius and kind of being disappointed that he saw it too late in the development of his style, where he's kind of saying, well, I kind of already figured out my look. And if I had seen it earlier, I probably would have brought a lot more of that into me. But there is this phase where we have to close, or most artists close certain doors so that kind of the pressure can push elsewhere. To me, you have a very highly developed visual language. So I'm just curious, like, how often you're considering playing with that or tinkering that, as opposed to the content, the color, and other things to experiment with. Because I don't think you can realistically reinvent every element of your own work. It just doesn't make sense,
That's not something that I'm necessarily concerned with. I think just after having years and years of experience with drawing, there's just a natural way that I draw. So I don't try to force a certain style. I think it's just really an accumulation of years and years and years of practice, and the style that emerged, this consistent style that I'm known for, like, that emerged just from certain decisions being made, but I guess having a kind of like a template, if that makes sense, like a kind of like the way that lines, your approach to line making, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I view it as there has to be some certainties in place so that you can go out further and explore. If the artists I know who never went anywhere, I think they're kind of wrapped up in the infinite possibility of the thing, in a negative sense. So
the infinite possibility in
a negative sense. Yeah. Like, for instance, imagine you sat down to draw and you were like, well, I could use a brush pen or this pen next to it or a crayon.
Yeah, I think people get too obsessed with like really incidental things. It's like when people start people who are non-musicians and they have like 3 band names I'm like, what? Do you remember that? Like when people are like, I have 3 band names. I'm like, do you know how to play any instruments? And it's kind of like that, where I think people sometimes obsess over things that are not really productive, like having a style or whatever. Because like I said, it wasn't forced. I think you have like various breakthroughs where like, okay, like I like how I resolved this idea. I like this image, and I'm going to continue, in a serial way to produce this. But again, like, I don't necessarily think that I'm bound by it. I think the way that I approach comics is very different now than painting. But I'm at a place where I do want to merge those worlds more, and I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet. But
that's exciting
because it's still
even
me at the end of the day,
right.
and obviously, like I think my character, I think I get that question a lot because of the starkness of the way that I depict figure. Is like people often ask like if these are characters that I envision, and the answer is yes, but I see them more as archetypes rather than specific characters. That they're like,
yeah, I see that.
they're like the Zodiac, or like actors portraying these figures.
Interesting. Are there recurring, quote unquote characters within these paintings?
Absolutely.
Do you know them? Do they have names for you? Or do you kind of?
There's a few names. Yeah, there's a few names.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like there's one guy named Michael Cosm, and Michael Cosm, he'll be featured in this upcoming comic, and yeah, he's one of the I guess a lot of my imagery is very moody, but yeah,
What do you mean?
I feel like there's a lot of mood in the work.
Mood. I don't disagree. I just don't even know what that means. I just feel that it's right.
Like mood, like just, like emotions, sadness, desire, romance, eroticism. They're moods, And I think, like, with color, again, like, I think with each color, I do think that there's a kind of mood associated with each color. And so I explore the nuance for each one. Like with blue, blue is somewhat pensive, of course, right? Like, that's pretty obvious. Like, you're blue, it means you're fucking sad. Or red is more passionate. It can be angry, furious, but also very sensual. And so,
in respect to the process for getting to these paintings, do you use a lot of time in the sketch phase? Or, I remember watching you and Ballmer draw a long time ago. And if I recall correctly, you guys were doing these collaboration drawings, and I don't think there was any sketching. It's kind of an immediacy to the work.
Those were totally improvisational. Like the shout out to Jesse Ballmer. But yeah, we draw all the time back in the day in the Bay Area, like 2010. And it was really like an improvisational exercise. And like sometimes I would just draw a bunch of squiggly lines on the paper and then just like toss the paper to Jesse. And Jesse, being the freak he is, he would just like make some like, some humanoid like beast. And then we would go back and forth. And again, like we were both in a place where, I think we're maybe looking for our own respective audiences. And there was a place that we would go to. That's where we met, actually. It was called Drink and Draw. I forget where they did it exactly, but it was in the Bay Area. And artists would get together and draw live, and then they would take their drawings, and like there would be a bulletin board where they hang up the art, and people could look at the art, and so we would make them there, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I was struck by the immediacy of those. Sorry, but it has me thinking when we're looking at these paintings. How much time do you spend in preliminary drawings versus just attacking an empty canvas?
With painting, I try not to obsess as much over the drawing. I think I begin with a concept, right? And so, if it's a figure, like let's say it's, let's say like recently I wanted to depict a figure holding up a phone, like, having a conversation on the phone. So I drew that, and it was essentially one draft. It doesn't take very long. And I like to retain some level of chance with the way I draw. And I think that's how how my style emerged. I think if I were to try to approach things from a more realist way, then of course it would take a lot longer. But that's not necessarily the goal. So the drawing is rather relatively less time consuming with painting. And what I do a lot is, like I said, the color being essential, I usually prepare each canvas with a kind of gradient effect using different colors. And I often like to live with those pieces for a long time. So if it's red, let's say, I might not have an immediate idea for the canvas, but I know that I want something that's going to complement that color. And I think just having it in the studio, like I think it's a nice vibe. And so once I finally arrive at an idea, then I draw the composition and go from there. But I do love to draw. I mean, I've been drawing since since the time I was very, very young, since I was 2 years old to be, yeah.
Did you think at that time, you said you were very interested in comics. Did you have a vision of where you would end up at this age?
I mean, I remember the first time I ever saw a comic. It was literally at a barber shop. I was going to get my hair cut. I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And I remember wanting the comic, wanting to even being a toddler, but wanting to steal a comic from the barbershop. And I think he gave the comic to my mom because that night my mom read the comic to me and my brother. And I think the fascination emerged just from there. And then and then, I liked a lot of the stuff that was popular as a kid. Like, I liked Marvel. I liked Image was really big. Like Spawn, that was really big. I was into that. And, I was a kid, so, I wasn't really like intellectualizing, but I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And I drew well. So I thought that would be the way that I would utilize my talent.
So you're doing it effectively. You've done it.
I did it. I experienced
No, I mean, I try to celebrate that. That's pretty crazy, It's a unique experience. It's a difficult experience.
Absolutely. I mean, I count my blessings. I'm really grateful that I've been able to travel the world to exhibit my artwork and to meet a lot of really cool people and it's always really humbling just to meet so many amazing artists who I respect, who complement the work that I've done.
So what are you working on now? Is there an exhibition coming up?
Right now I'm focused on this sequential piece, this story that I've been working on for a long time. I mean, I'm painting in the studio, but I don't have a specific exhibition, which feels good. I think last year was a pretty busy year in terms of painting. I had three significant exhibitions last year. One was in Shanghai, which was really cool. The other one was in Paris. And so this year it feels good, honestly, not to have any deadlines related to art. So I'm working on paintings here, just exploring new stuff. And then also working on sequential stuff. So that's something that we'll see more of, hopefully, before the end of this year.
Nice. All right.
All right, Michael. Great talking with you.
Yeah, man.
All right, bro. Have a good night.
You too.
Music by Dori Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. Not sure who's up next. Who knows?
Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron, Jonny Negron.